Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm CJ Vogel, joined by Gerry Hamilton. We're going to do something a little bit new, and you'll see this show pop up each week before games on Saturday. We're going to talk the SEC and what's going on across the entire Southeastern conferences, whether it be the big games, whether it be teams that are surprising, disappointing, or what's left on Texas's schedule, right? We're just a couple of weeks away from SEC play starting up in Austin with Mississippi State coming down to face the Longhorns for their first ever game in conference play. Of course, Texas has UTSA this weekend, but we're going to preview a little bit of what's to come on the Texas schedule a little bit later, as well as diving into some teams that have surprised a little bit and disappointed. And you're going to hear some familiar Texas rivals on that disappointed schedule or topic right there. But Gerry, I know that Texas is off to a hot start, 2-0. You just go on the road to Michigan. You come away with a big road victory there. SEC play a few weeks away. I'll toss it to you real quick, but what's left for Texas to prove to you before you see them line up and play Mississippi State?
I mean, I'm not sure to prove anything, right? It's to me, it's about getting more guys experience. I think these next two games for Texas are huge for getting guys game experience, continue to get guys acclimated to the system, who are the transfer portal guys or the newcomers, getting more experience because injuries will happen over the course of the season. So these two games are huge. And I think Sark said as much, CJ, in the press conference as you attended. It's about they plan to play a lot of players the next 2 weeks, and that is to get this team ready to deal with a longer season, hopefully, and prepared in case of injury. But I think more than anything, part of playing those players, so many players, is, you're going to see more of Ryan Wingo, Silas Bolden, Amari Nyblack, some of those guys who are new to the program, freshmen or transferred in, and kind of even a Jelani McDonald, who's seeing his first real game action this year. Yeah. Getting those guys more snaps so they're more comfortable, continue to get more comfortable, get integrated into the offense more, so some of those newcomers. And that's Trey Wisner, who doesn't have – how many carries does he have in his career? Jarrett Gibson. Those guys haven't carried the football, played a lot of running back at the college level yet. So that's why this season sets up so well for me with Texas. There's a lot of upside on this team, and I think Sark gets to start building that the next 2 weeks.
Of course, when the schedules were released for SEC play, Gerry, it did look like Texas had a pretty favorable draw, right? You only had 3 true road games, one of which to Vanderbilt, which I'm sure most SEC fans would kind of look at and say, yeah, not necessarily a true SEC environment out there in Nashville. 2 weeks into the year, have you kind of changed your outlook on this Texas SEC schedule? I'm sure looking across the board, you're looking at Oklahoma and A&M maybe not being as potent as you thought coming in, but on the other side, Arkansas sure looking like a team that might cause some issues on the road later on.
Yeah, it's so interesting because if you say, the schedule's not as tough as you think, people are like, you're rat poison, you're disrespecting what Texas has to play. I'm not doing that. But I am saying this. When this schedule initially came out, Kentucky was considered a team that could be a top 25 team, right? Florida had the hardest schedule ever, but they're still a really talented team. Oklahoma was Oklahoma. Now you look at the schedule like, okay, Mississippi State gave up 270 yards rushing to a Sacramento State transfer who will play in the NFL in some capacity. They got the ball ran down their throat in Tempe. You look at Kentucky, a lot of injuries, but they got annihilated by South Carolina at home and probably have quarterback issues and offensive line issues. You look at Texas A&M. What are they going to have offensively? There's some similarities to Michigan with them on offense. Like, what are they going to have an identity? What's that identity going to be? And can they have the identity they want at A&M? So you have that. And then Oklahoma offensively has been terrible. I don't know what else to say. Yes, they have offensive line injuries, but with that being said, that's not the level of offensive line they've had in previous years under Bill Biedenbaugh. And you have a first-year starting quarterback who was probably overhyped, and he may have a fight on his hands to keep the job from Michael Hawkins long-term. I think he does. So, you start to look around. Arkansas, really good on offense. That gives them a chance. Vanderbilt, they got to keep their quarterback upright. A long time before Texas plays them. But if you look at this Texas schedule, I mean, I'm not going to talk about Georgia. We've talked about that. And in Florida, you just don't know what you're going to get when they come to Austin. So this schedule, while I thought it was already favorable, CJ, I think is even more favorable. If we're being real, team has to go out and get it done, but it's more favorable than it was when the schedule was first released.
Yeah, I like that kind of scoring output that you mentioned with Arkansas. If you can score, you'll be able to keep up with Texas. We've seen them against one of the top 5, top 10 defenses in all the country put up 31, I'd say rather easily through 2.5 quarters. And obviously they let their foot off the gas towards the end there. But if you can score, you'll keep up. And right now that gives hope to an Arkansas whose offense has looked really impressive so far. Whereas in Oklahoma, you're looking at it kind of saying, how do they get points on the board if it's not a defensive touchdown or short field? But to the point, I wanted to pivot a little bit, Jerry, because I do think, to your point about the schedule, it has kind of turned more favorably to an already favorable schedule if you're a Texas fan. But looking ahead, there are some matchups that play into Texas's lap here as well. Who are some of these teams that have impressed through 2 weeks? Of course, there have been – each team's played, I would say for the most part, one tough team. You've had Missouri and Ole Miss play a couple high school teams so far, but you've gotten an idea through 2 weeks of what each team is going to be moving forward. Is there a team off the top of your head right now that's standing out to you? I'll give one right after.
Tennessee, for me, because their offensive line is going to be a top 5 offensive line in the country.
Ooh.
I think, and that's a good thing for a first-year starting quarterback. They moved NC State off the line of scrimmage.
That's a complete different situation than Oklahoma right now.
Yes, 100%. You knew they'd be pretty good on defense. You knew Nico could make plays with his feet. I still think he has some development to do as a passer. He threw a couple of picks against NC State. It helps that Heupel pretty much plays him on half the field. That's not going to help his NFL necessarily, but it helps him in college. Running back is a tough dude carrying the football, but that offensive line is experienced and looks like one of the better lines in the country to me, watching them against NC State. So that's a team, and that's bad news for Oklahoma because they're better than people thought. And I'm not saying they're going to finish top 3 or 4 in the SEC. We're going to have to see how that plays out. But they're better. And South Carolina, you have to say, is better because they have maybe the best edge rush combo in the SEC, and that's saying something. The freshman Dylan Stewart may be the best freshman in college football. And Kyle Kennard, who transferred from Georgia Tech, is a problem. Those guys have combined for 6 sacks in 2 games. I mean, and LSU's coming to town with injuries. I mean, so I think South Carolina's a little better as well. CJ, who you got? And I might play off you for one more. And then we're going to talk about who's worse, but I think we're going to have the same answer.
Yeah, I was just looking it up. South Carolina picked 11th in the preseason SEC media poll, so gives you an idea of where the expectations were. You go on the road and you smack Kentucky in their own house. So, all right, you have my attention a little bit. We'll talk about Kentucky on who's maybe disappointed a little bit coming up. But the team I wanted to mention again was Arkansas. That offensive revival with Bobby Petrino there. I mean, listen, I knew he liked Taylon Green. I didn't think you'd have Taylon Green looking like, I don't want to say it, but like a Cam Newton clone 2.0, a poor man's Cam Newton, in the sense that he's running the football everywhere. He's making the right reads. And I know that Arkansas Pine Bluff is not much more than the folks that you see running out on a Thursday night for a JV field. But my goodness, he looked good. He looked decisive. He was making good plays across the board. And hey, you put up 650 yards against an Oklahoma State team on the road, in which you should have won that game. Right, you outgained them by 240 yards. You have 3 turnovers in midfield. You make a wrong decision in overtime, and all of a sudden you're a loser in a game in which you basically dominated for 3 straight quarters. I think they're legit, Jerry. I do, and I do want to say Vanderbilt's another school that I think is much more improved than what you thought because of that quarterback, Diego Pavia. He's got some magic to him.
And I know that he's a playmaker, CJ.
He's a gamer at the quarterback position. I know that Vanderbilt on field, on paper, is still Vanderbilt in terms of the talent that they have to compete a week in, week out SEC. But when you have a gamer and you have a guy that can create something out of nothing at the quarterback position, it changes a lot. So it's not going to be a super competitive game, I think, for Texas. But I do think that they'll be able to surprise a team or two in SEC play, maybe play spoiler later on.
Yeah, so I totally agree. And Vanderbilt's big. They honestly, Texas over Michigan's the best win. But we're from considering what people think of Vanderbilt, their win over Virginia Tech, maybe the second best win in the SEC this year.
Folks are picking Virginia Tech as like a sleeper to win the ACC.
Yes.
That game was multiple possessions late, and it got close, but to come away with the victory, I mean, different Vanderbilt, it looks like.
And the school you wouldn't think did well in the portal, Vanderbilt got a quarterback, and without Diego Pavia, they don't win that game. If they had the same quarterbacks last year, they can't score enough. So Vanderbilt did a great job in the portal at quarterback. Maybe Mike Norvell should have looked that direction. All right, so worst teams, CJ, I mean, let's just throw out Oklahoma and Kentucky for me. And I was thinking Oklahoma might be a 9-win team before the season. I knew they were going to had to replace the offensive line. I've never been as high on Jackson Arnold as other people. I actually think Michael Hawkins will take over that job eventually. But they've also had injuries and offensive line questions, rebuilt offensive line. And what are they on center 3 now? And they've played 2 games. One was hurt in the spring. And then I think Gary and Hatchett had played some. Now he's out. Jake Taylor can't stay healthy at right tackle. They don't have a running game to lean on. And they didn't have one last year. That really hurts Jackson Arnold in this offensive line because they don't have you can't just hand the ball off and say, all right, just go do something. Go make a play for us. Go get us 6 yards on 2nd and 9 and get us to at least a 3rd and 2 where we have some breathing room. They don't have any of that. Then they have Nick Anderson's been out. Farouk's injured now. They've got issues on offense. But even with that being said, it's worse than I thought it was going to be. And I'm here to tell you, if they can scrape by Tulane, and we'll see. I mean, Brent Venables' press conference yesterday, CJ, you'd have thought Tulane won the national championship, was having a parade. Okay, you think they're the best team in the country. If Oklahoma can escape that game and win, they have Tennessee coming to town, and I think they're going to, unless there's a drastic change in confidence and execution, I think they're going to get their butt kicked.
Yeah, I do too. I was talking about it the other day with a couple of folks who, kind of dabble in the gambling where I'll say, listen, whatever it is, Oklahoma is a 14-point favorite at home against Tulane. Put that game aside. Whatever that first line is for Tennessee, whenever they come to town to Norman 2 weeks from now, go ahead and throw a couple dollars on what the Vols got. I just see it because of what we mentioned. Offensive line for Tennessee, good. Offensive line for Oklahoma, bad. Yes. And right now, that's the biggest difference in what you'll see from these two programs in the SEC.
CJ, that's a great point. Think about this. Tennessee's better on the offensive line than Oklahoma. They're better quarterback than Oklahoma. They're better running back than Oklahoma. And they're probably better on the defensive front.
So
that makes for a tough game for the Sooners at home.
I'm with you 100%. My team, I was going to say, that has disappointed so far, and I'll throw A&M out the window. I think that first game maybe wasn't as indicative of Connor Wakeman as what you'll see the rest of the year. I'm still pretty high on him as a quarterback. I'm going LSU. And listen, I wasn't high on LSU to begin this season. I said that they'll probably be a 7-5 team. If I was to be completely honest with what I see with LSU, they have a good quarterback, not a Heisman winner. They got good receivers. Kyron Lacey, really good. They don't have 2 first-round guys. Oh, and why am I to believe again that defense would be much better than what we saw a year ago in which they couldn't stop anybody? Well, they already lost once to USC. USC could be very good. Their defense looks fixed, whatever. But to allow 21 points to Nicholls State, that's concerning. Now you're moving Harold Perkins from middle linebacker to a star position. I get it. Maybe you just want him off the edge a little bit more, get some extra looks as a pass rusher. But now you've got all sorts of different question marks going into the SEC. And again, I don't think you have a good quarterback. You don't have a game-changing Heisman-level quarterback to get you over some of those hurdles and bumps that were evident last year that are still evident this year. So LSU, for me, I still think is a team that has a lot of question marks moving forward.
We'll make some picks on that game in a second. I have a feeling. But let's say this, too. It's almost a must-win game for them at South Carolina Saturday because that season could go the wrong direction. They lost their leading rusher, Emery, for the season, and their best D-tackle, Guillory, for the season last week. They're both gone. So even the team that you watched the last 2 weeks is now not as good as they were.
And
that's a big game coming up Saturday for Brian Kelly. It's going to get ugly in BR if he loses.
That's exactly where I was going to go next. If you're game 3, year 3, already in a must-win situation at LSU, I mean, Brian Kelly, good luck. But let's see how much longer that accent can keep you going in Baton Rouge. Jerry, has there been a player that surprised you so far? You mentioned Dylan Stewart at South Carolina. Mm-hmm. Did you expect that coming out? I know he's a 5-star, highly talented kid. Anybody individually that surprised you thus far?
I'm trying to think. That's a good question. Like Ryan Williams, I've always thought was a stud. And this is a compliment to him and Xavier Worthy. I think he's a better version of Xavier Worthy. I'm thinking about it. I might go to Texas on this, CJ. I might go to Texas on this, and I might throw a guy out like Andrew Makuba.
Yeah.
Because Texas has played a big game. It was a road game. It was Michigan. But what he's done to help tie the Texas secondary together and make them vastly improve the safety position when that was a weakness of the team last year, that's pretty impactful for a team that was already really good. If I went with another one, it'd be the freshman running back at Georgia, who I think is going to be huge for the Dogs, Nate Frazier.
Yeah.
On a modern day, he is fast. And if you have speed, run him behind that Georgia offensive line. And he's not small either. You're talking about a 5'11", 200-pound guy, 195-pound guy, but you're talking about 10'6" and 100. That gives Georgia a different dimension than even their last 2 or 3 teams have had. This guy has a different level of speed. So maybe it's Frazier on offense and Makuba on defense. What do you got, CJ?
Yeah, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Maybe it's just Petrino's got a hold of me, but I'm going back to Arkansas. Jaquindon Jackson, 32 carries, 250 yards, 5 touchdowns through 2 games. First time being a true bell cow number 1. I've liked what I've seen so far. They're using him out of the backfield in the pass game. He runs physical. He's a guy late in games that you can rely on to get the tough yardage. If he can hold on to the football, he's going to be in that running for an all-SEC honoree at the running back spot come to the end of the year. All right, Jerry, that'll do it for today. The SEC show, first time. And as this season continues, there'll be more storylines, there'll be more predictions, of course. But for Gerry Hamilton, I'm CJ Vogel. This has been On Texas Football, a little bit of a peel back of the curtain for the SEC.